there's something to be said for that. Like when you think of who's on the left, well, there are some Hollywood actresses and movie stars and supermodels. There's a truth to that. But there's also a lot of 300-pound, blue-haired trolls. There's a lot of those too. Yep, there is a lot of, like, even when you think more like, have you noticed, like with lesbians, for instance? So that is inherently immoral. Internally, it's ugly. It's immoral. It's against God's law. But externally, lesbianism does tend to appeal to women who are externally less attractive.
More masculine. They have more masculine features.
More masculine,
which is also
external
genetic
features. And then internally, they also then choose to embody that. So the question is, am I going to allow the external to dictate the internal? So if I am a man in my 20s and I'm less physically strong for whatever reason, genetically, it's not just because I'm lazy, but it really is God's providence. What am I going to do with that providence? How am I going to respond? Am I going to lean into Christ and pursue spiritual strength? Or am I going to be bitter and angry and pursue effeminacy? And then same for the woman. So it's not a default mechanism, because I think the church has kind of said that, not explicitly. I don't know anybody who's explicitly said it, but I think that message has been generally conveyed, that if you're a woman who is physically, externally unattractive in your youth, well, that will just automatically produce virtue in your old age. And that's not true. There are a lot of women who are physically unattractive, and then they grow in to becoming older women who are internally unattractive.
This is something, I think it's maybe newer, because I remember my grandparents and even my parents talking about how single women who never marry can become very ugly women in their old age. I think this is something that older generations had a better handle on than we do now.
And physical health leads to, if you're healthy, you're not in pain, you're active, that's also going to lead you to, generally speaking, you're going to be more patient, you're going to be more charitable, inviting, generous. Like we always have this idea of the jock. Well, there's the jock, and he's strong, and he's handsome, and he's good looking, but he's rude. The reality is most people that are generally good looking, successful, they're often pretty kind and generous at some level. Not every single one, but at some level. That's why physical health often lends itself towards type of spiritual warmth and kindness.
Well, and that's honestly, like, people have used this phrase before, and I think it's again, not in every individual case, but generally true, that a lot of the oppression that we've experienced has been the results of living underneath a theater kid occupied government.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You've probably heard that phrase, theater kid occupied government. That at some point what happened, I said this in a sermon months ago, and people loved it. People hated it. I got a ton of flack. So naturally, I'll go ahead and say it again. But you know how we've used the phrase "nature is healing." The rubber band is snapping back into place. The anti-bullying campaign in America that has been very popular through pop modern psychology and all these, and Christians have adopted it as well. There's a way of being mean-spirited that is immoral. It's wrong. Mm-hmm. But there's also a way of God's natural order being asserted among human society, and what we did through basically every film, through Hollywood and social media, and at every level in our culture, what we did over the last couple recent decades is we have glorified the nerd and demonized the jock, right? So, like, well,
that's because you've got 19-year-old nerds running around absolutely trashing the Treasury Department right now.
Right. That's true. But like, I remember it was a few years ago, but there was a TV show called, what was it called? Pied Piper was the name of the business that the guy started. It was a nerd.
I don't watch slops, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, but I'm trying to remember the name. He started a company called Pied Piper. Somebody's going to put it in the chat, I'm sure. I hope somebody's going to put it in the chat.
They don't watch slops, so they don't know.
Yeah,
they don't watch slops.
And they're a tiny bit delayed.
But anyways, the point is, I think it was Vogue magazine or something showed
Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley. There you go. Silicon Valley. So I think it was Vogue magazine did as a cover on one of their issues, the 4 male characters from that show, those actors, and they were all standing in a line, like basically spooning each other, but in a standing position. And they each had their hand in the guy directly in front of them, his pocket, instead of their own. Whoa. And the caption, if I remember correctly, because it was iconic. It was iconic in a disgusting way, but it's iconic nonetheless. It stood out. But the caption was the year of the beta male.
The rise of the triumph of the beta male.
The triumph of the beta male. Word. And the triumph of the beta male.
And they're wearing like sweater vests and like they're half balding up top. It's rough.
And so the triumph of that timeline when Vogue issued that magazine and that TV show was in its heyday, the triumph, that time period in our nation where the beta male triumphed also happened to correspond just perfectly with the time of COVID lockdowns, BLM, transgenderism, abortion at an all-time high, pretty much the worst things you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, right.
God did not design the world to be ruled by women, children, geriatric elders with dementia.
Mitch McConnell,
talking to you, Mitch McConnell, talking to you, Joe Biden, or weak, pathetic men who would struggle to bench press a pencil with 2 Fruit Loops on either end. God didn't design the world that way. So my point is, people say physiognomy is undefeated. I wouldn't say it's undefeated, but there is something to that principle. I don't think it's just ridiculous. And that's part of what we're trying to argue is that a true beauty for a woman is internal, not external. It's imperishable, doesn't fade, and it's beauty of the heart that is pleasing in the sight of God, which is defined by a quiet and gentle spirit. However, we acknowledge all that. But what the whole point of this episode, if you go all the way back to the beginning, is, and I think Wes did a wonderful job of kind of setting the tone, is saying that these 2 things, beauty in the external and beauty in the internal, there it is. Gosh, that's gay. So gay.
Is that Gospel Coalition?
I think that might be. So anyways, but the point is that for men, strength in the physical and strength spiritually, and for women, beauty externally and beauty internally. What we're saying is that his good and natural design is not that these would be opposed to one another, but that there would be a correlation between the two. That there would be a natural transition from external beauty. As it fades, there's also this uptake and increase in spiritual internal beauty. And for men, as your physical strength begins to fade, that it's also in real time in God's design being replaced with that crown, the silver crown of gray hair and spiritual strength and wisdom. And so, I think that physiognomy is not completely undefeated because I want to play the devil's advocate for a moment. Even Satan masquerades as an angel of light, right? And there are plenty of Hollywood actors that are externally beautiful or externally strong who are degenerates. So we're not saying that it's a 100% guarantee. But I think that the church has embraced that the opposite is a guarantee. And that's what I'm trying to push back on. I think the church has assumed that because you can be good looking and spiritually immature and immoral, then that somehow guarantees that the ugliest woman is going to be the most spiritually mature. Right, and the reality is, like I said, time heals all wounds is not true. Jesus heals all wounds, but he does so in time. Likewise, difficult providence that includes suffering and challenge, like a woman being less attractive physically than she would want to be, or a man being less strong physically than he would want to be, that does not guarantee that what you're lacking externally would just be automatically made up for internally, spiritually. It's what you do with the providence of God.
All right, the clock is running out. You need to go and register now for our Christ is King How to Defeat Trash World Conference. It's happening the year of our Lord 2025, April 3rd, 4th, and 5th. That's a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And by God's grace, we're able to provide for you an all-star lineup. We've got Steve Dace, Calvin Robinson, Orrin McIntyre, Dr. Stephen Wolf, Eric Kahn, David Reese, Andrew Isker, John Harris, A.D. Robles, Dan Burkholder, Dusty Devers, Ben Garrett, C.J. Engel, and yours truly, Pastor Joel Webben. Come on out, join us April 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 2025, Thursday through a Saturday. Go to rightresponseconference.com to register today. Again, that's rightresponseconference.com.